Behold, the Simplicity 7012 Landlord hydrostatic 12 horsepower lawn tractor. I'm Chris F from Make Everything, and today we're going to try to fix it. Check it out. All right, so this is my Simplicity riding mower. My friend Matt gave me this. It was sitting in his garage for a while, and I know that it needs some fuel line work and some carburetor work. First, we're going to vacuum out the rat's nest that's over by the ignition switch. We're going to be getting a battery. This video is sponsored by WD-40 brand, and I'm going to be using the WD-40 Specialist Penetrant Spray with Easy Reach to try to get this carburetor off, because we got some pretty stuck nuts and bolts all over this machine, and getting the carb off and cleaned is going to be essential for getting this thing to run. So after spraying that on there, it allowed me to free up those two nuts and bolts to get this carb off, and I can take this thing over to my little bucket and start cleaning it out. Now, if you've watched any of my other videos, especially with small engine stuff, cleaning out a carburetor is probably the first thing you want to do on anything like this. Even though it doesn't have a battery, I did hook this thing up to a jumper pack. I did get it to crank, but it obviously wouldn't start because the carburetor was filled with junk. After getting that cleaned, I can put this thing back on just by kind of rebolting it over to the motor, and then I'm going to be replacing the fuel lines and sort of the fuel delivery system. Now, this doesn't have a gravity-fed fuel system. There is actually a fuel pump, and at this point, I'm pretty sure it works. I'm hoping that it does because I don't want to replace it, but using clear fuel lines will actually allow me to see what's happening when I start cranking it. I bought a new battery from the auto parts store, and then I can just sort of wire it up. I did have a photo of the old battery, so I knew what size to get. This thing fits on a little plywood shelf well, and then I can go ahead and fill the tank with some gasoline and see if this thing is going to fire up. Now, there's a bunch of other work to do on it, but I want to make sure it runs before I spend any time. And if you look on the left of the carb, you can see that fuel pump is pushing fuel vertically towards the carburetor. And since I just cleaned it, I've got to sort of crank it, give it some time to settle, make sure that fuel is getting in, out through all those jets and getting through my fuel filter. You can see the whole system right there. And after a little bit of cranking, it started up. So you can see I was actually also moving the mower a little bit. Even though I'm in my shop, I was kind of smoking myself out with that exhaust, but I did want to make sure the hydrostatic motor worked. This is a little bit different from a more like direct mechanical transmission. There's a hydrostatic motor drive unit underneath the seat, which gives you more torque and allows you to use accessories, but it is a little bit non-conventional compared to like a lawnmower or a chainsaw. Now, it's got two headlights on the front, and I wanted to make sure that those worked. One of them does, you can see right there, and the other one does not. And the way I test these is just by using a 12-volt battery from my drills and some little leads that I can connect to the hot side and then ground out. And it's just showing me that I'm going to need a new bulb for this, which I ordered online. While I was waiting for that to come, obviously I had a bunch of other work to do. So over here is basically a hydraulic override. So you've got those two little kind of tabs on the top there, and when you push down that metal plate, it disengages the hydraulic valve, and that allows you to push the mower. Otherwise, you'd be pushing and resisting that hydraulic pump if you were to try to push this thing while it wasn't running. Now, it's important that this works because I don't want to damage the hydraulic unit if I don't have those disabled. And because these things were a little stuck, I used the WD-40 Specialist Penetrating Spray again just to sort of get those things moving. And you can see now they're really well freed up, which will allow the hydraulic pressure to push those little ball bearings up and in the right position so that this feature actually functions properly. It's definitely critical that this works, so I also use some WD-40 Specialist Dry Lubricant to make sure that those things are going to work out really well, and then I could go ahead and reinstall them on the unit and install that little plate which pushes those two little tabs down or allows them to operate on their own, depending on which mode you're in. Now, the next critical part of this mower is the parking brake, and the parking brake is underneath the sort of, I guess you would call the passenger side tire. So I took that off and jacked up the machine so that I could see it. Now, it's a very simple system. It's basically like a clamp, and it runs off of this little lever over by your right foot. And my property that I'm bringing this to is very hilly, and this unit weighs about 1,000 pounds. So it's definitely got enough of its own weight that once it starts going down a hill, I'm not going to be able to stop it. So I wanted to make sure that the parking brake was functioning properly. In order to do that, I cleaned everything up and I sprayed some WD-40 Specialist white lithium grease on it, which is going to allow that to function that much better, just be a little more lubricated because it was a little bit sticky. With that done, I also used some WD-40 Specialist heavy duty grease on all the Zerk fittings that I could find on the machine, and I actually put some on the lug nuts, lug bolts for the rear tire as well. It's always good to grease stuff like this because it just allows it to seat a little bit better and keeps it from getting loose or potentially seizing up in the future. With the tire reinstalled, I could reinflate both of the rear tires. Luckily, I did not have to replace the rear tires. They're a little expensive, but they do hold air and have pretty good tread left on them. Now, the front tires were a different story. This uses tubeless tires on all four, and the front tires had definitely been slimed or gooped or whatever, trying to basically keep that bead intact. They were pretty hard to remove. They used this kind of silly retaining bolt, and once I was able to get those off, I started to go through the process of trying to remove the tires. Now, these had definitely been bead locked or glued on, and it was really, really difficult to get these off. Normally, I can use large tire levers on a tire like this, and they pop off pretty easily. One of these tires, it probably took me about 30 minutes to get the tire off, and this is the better of the two. I use my leg vise here to hold the rim, and then basically just use the tire levers to pull it off. I was trying not to cut these off. I just thought it'd be better to try to remove them in one piece. And when I got to this tire, I really struggled. This tire was filled with water, and I couldn't get the air out because the valve stem was filled with whatever goo or sealant that the person before me had used. So I wound up drilling a hole in it, which helped me relieve the air in it, and then trying to break that bead was really difficult. And now as I start to expose the rim, you can see what I was dealing with. Eventually, after I got one side of the bead broken, I just having so much trouble that I decided to use a metal cutting blade on my Sawzall to just cut the bead of the tire and pull this thing off. These were going in the garbage in the first place, so I should have just cut them off, but you can see all the crud and just corrosion that's on this rim. I spent some time cleaning it up with a wire brush, and then I was able to put the new tires on. I went with something with a lot more traction, and I also decided to go with a tube this time. I just figured with the property that I have, more traction is definitely going to be better. This is a two-wheel drive unit, so these will help me with steering. And I always like to have a tubed tire because I don't have to rely on that bead in order to make sure that I'm holding air. Once I started filling it up, I was having a little bit trouble setting the bead, and a good trick for that is you can kind of like bang the tire around, inflate it, deflate it, and then eventually you'll see that bead pop. Now, it is important that the bead is set because you want the tire to sit evenly, but with the tube, I don't have to worry about it staying there. And because I don't go to my property very often, it's very possible that these tires will lose air over time, and instead of having to try to reset a bead, I just have to pump up that tube, and I could even patch the tube if I get a thorn or a piece of metal in there. Once the front wheels were retreaded, I could put them back on. There's some bearings and stuff there, and a little shaft collar that you tighten in. The other thing was the top of the gas cap has a little fuel gauge in it, and it had broken off. My friend Matt warned me that this will actually leak and allow water into the gas tank. So I put a little piece of PVC on there and glued it on with some special bonding cement, which will keep water out of it. Once I got my new headlight, the next task was to rewire the headlights, which I did with some new fasteners, and then I tested them again with my 12-volt battery to make sure that they work. At this point, both of the headlights were working, which was awesome, which will be really nice to have. And then it was a matter of just making a little air filter. The original air filter for this was missing, so I made a quick template out of some paper, and I bought a Kohler air filter on Amazon that I thought would fit. Unfortunately, it did not, so I had to modify the bracket just with a Dremel, ground away some of that plastic, and drilled some holes so that I could go ahead and put this onto the carburetor. I didn't want to just have an open port on the side of the machine because there's a lot of dirt and dust, and I figured I'd pretty quickly suck something into that carb and clog it. So an air filter or just some sort of an air shroud is definitely going to be helpful. I'm trying to locate the original air filter because I would like to have it on there. So eventually I might do that. Next task was to clean the seat. This thing was pretty filthy, so I used a carpet extractor that I actually use at my house to just put some hot water and cleaning solution on it and then vacuum it out, sort of extract the dirt from that seat. You can see how gross it was. And then get this thing outside for a test ride. This is the first time actually riding it, and it has a ton of torque and power. I was super impressed with it. It is a really heavy-duty unit, and it, obviously charged up the driveway, no problem. We took a couple laps around the block, checked that the headlights work, and then we could load it up into the van to bring it upstate. This unit weighs about 1,100 pounds. It is shockingly heavy for what it is, but we were able to get it in and out no problem. And then the last thing was to add an 1 7/8" ball to the back so that I could tow my little utility trailer that we've had for a while. And this is going to be awesome to have up here. The little tow ball on the back is going to allow me to hook up this little trailer that Mac had got a couple years back. We fixed the tires on this, and this will allow me to bring sticks and material all around the property, bags of cement, stuff like that. And overall, this thing is running great and is going to be so awesome to have up here. I left it the way it looked because I think the patina on it is awesome. It's clean and functions great. All right, that about does it for this video. I'm super happy with this thing. This is exactly what I need up here at my property in upstate New York. It is going to be great to kind of clear up a lot of the deadfall and all these sticks and garbage that's all over this 6.5 acre property. The hydrostatic motor is great. There's a ton of torque, and I did some research on these mowers, and with that cast iron Kohler motor, apparently these things just are bomb proof and run forever as long as you take care of them. So I'm really happy I was able to get it running, get new tires on it, and get it up here. And I think it's going to be a great addition to this property and allow me to do a lot of work. So thank you to WD-40 brand for sponsoring this video. I use the WD-40 brand Specialist Penetrant to get into a lot of the nooks and crannies and nuts and bolts on this thing, which helped a lot. I actually also used it to try to free up the bead on the front tires when I was pulling it off, and I was able to use some of the WD-40 brand Specialist lubricant on the parking brake, which helps a lot. And since this property is really hilly, I'm definitely going to need that. So it's great that the parking brake is working really well now that it's lubricated and freed up. There was a lot of stuck parts on this, and all those different penetrating sprays really help with that. So there's some future work that I can do to this. When I got it, it came with a mower deck, but it needs a bunch of work. So I'm going to be able to kind of fix that up and get it up here. There isn't a lot of grass, but there is some tall weeds and stuff that I could mow up on the top section. And then my friend Matt, who gave me this machine, also has a snowblower attachment for the front, which would be really fun to modify because it's not made for this machine, but there is like a spinning PTO shaft in the front of the motor. And it'd be really cool to get that on there and get it running. That would be awesome. Hope you enjoyed this video. I really enjoy restoring old machines like this, and I had a lot of fun getting this one running, especially one as rewarding as a machine you can actually just get on and drive around. So if you liked it, please leave me a comment down below. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos like this, more videos in my shop and at my property here in upstate New York, doing all sorts of random stuff. If you want to see what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis, follow me right here at Make Everything Shop. Post a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff, posted about this when we got it running, and a bunch of things like that. A lot of content from up here and a lot of content pretty much every day. And that's about it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, I'm Chris Zepp from Make Everything, and I hope to see you on the next one.